the notion of the characters that had previously been under a Fox agreement coming back is great. Number one, it's nice when a company that created all these characters can have access to all those characters. It's unusual not to. Mm-hmm. Marvel's been in a unique position to not have access to the characters in a long time. And for me, going full circle to our conversation, that's where I started. Mm-hmm. That's where I started, almost 20 years ago now. Yeah.
Hey everybody, it's Charlie. You may remember a little while ago Kevin Feige talking about bringing Namor into the MCU. He said that they definitely have plans. They're just trying to get the details right. When, if, how it's going to happen because of all the X-Men and Fantastic Four stuff that'll be happening really soon. One of the reasons why they were holding off on introducing the character is because of the Aquaman movie. They were waiting to see. It's billion-dollar franchises. You don't take too many chances if you don't have to. Pretty smart move on their part. Just wait and see, like if audiences buy into the idea of an underwater character and tonally just to see what DC came up with. So now that we've all seen it and Aquaman's on track to earn about $1 billion worldwide, there are some other new challenges that Marvel faces because now that we have an underwater character and Namor's backstory reads so similarly to Aquaman, it presents a really interesting challenge for Marvel. So let's break it down. There's a new round of that IMAX ticket giveaway too. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment about Namor on the video. So first things first, Aquaman movie, nobody could have predicted how well it would have done. Like sometimes you just don't know till you know. But regardless of how you feel about the weird pop songs and the Pitbull that they put into it, people have been voting with their dollars. So it's not so much a question of audiences buying into the idea of an underwater character or Atlantis, because Namor is also from Atlantis. Atlantis is a fictional place, but it's taken from real world mythology, so there's no copyright on it. It's the same thing with deities like the Greek gods. Like there could be a Poseidon in the Aquaman movie, but there can also be a Poseidon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the biggest problem that Marvel faces is just in the fact that Namor feels so similar on paper to Aquaman. Their backstories read very similarly. They've both been retconned a couple times in the comics. If you go back to the Golden Age, they're almost the exact same character. By the time you get to the Silver Age, there are some differences, and then in more recent Marvel comics, they have taken the character in a dramatically different direction than DC has taken their Aquaman comic book character. So it's not as bad nowadays, but think about it this way. Son of a sea captain and an Atlantean princess becomes King of Atlantis. Who am I talking about, Namor or Aquaman? To answer the question, I'm talking about Namor, but if you're a casual audience goer, you don't read comics, you wouldn't know the difference. Like it would almost be the exact same thing.
Aquaman set box office records.
Oh, enough with Aquaman. My goodness.
What's
Give
happening?
me a friggin' break.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. Did you say something?
That's right. I said something.
Oh, I remember you. You're Prince Nemo, right?
How dare you? Nemo is a clownfish. Do I look like a clownfish, Jimmy? No, I am Prince Namor, a.k.a. the Submariner.
That's right. I'm sorry, Emma. If you don't know, Prince Namor is a somewhat obscure Marvel character.
Obscure?
Yeah, a little bit. He was here a few months ago. You were very upset you weren't in the Avengers movie, right?
Yeah, that's the short version. Yeah.
So there are a couple really easy things Marvel can do to control public perception of its own Atlantean king. I just broke this down like a top 5 list, so starting with 5, Marvel introduces the character the way they did during the Silver Age comics. The character was not originally a Marvel comic book character. Marvel just bought the rights from the original creators and publishers. So like I said, during the Golden Age when Namor first debuted, he was almost exactly the same as Aquaman. But by the time you get to the Silver Age, Marvel gains the characters and starts to take him in a very different direction. He becomes more of an anti-hero, working with people like Doctor Doom. So in his Silver Age reintroduction, Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four finds Namor in a homeless shelter with no memory of his past, no idea that he has special powers. Johnny Storm instantly recognizes who he is and knows what he has to do in order to help him. He splashes him with salt water, knowing that it's going to help reactivate his powers. Namor gets his memories back and goes back to Atlantis. This era of the comics is when Marvel started saying that Namor was King of Atlantis. Previously, he was just the son of a sea captain and an aquatic princess. They didn't get into the Game of Thrones aspect till they started talking about Atlantis. But in the MCU, just recently, we had the snap. Half of all life was erased by Thanos in an instant. The Avengers will be bringing most of those people back during Avengers Endgame through a lot of different means, changing the universe on a fundamental level. The physical trauma alone from all those big changes in such a short amount of time is an easy way to explain how a powerful character like Namor could have his memory wiped and just turn up in some unlikely place for a Fantastic Four character, an X-Men, or an older MCU Avenger character to find, like, wait a minute, you're actually like a really powerful special person. What are you doing here? How come you don't remember where you're from? But like I said, because Aquaman's so big right now, if they just come right out and say, hey, we're doing a Namor movie in a couple of years, they will be accused of copying. So that's why they have to kind of wait a little bit for Aquaman stuff to cool down before. Another easy way to distinguish him is by introducing him in someone else's giant franchise film, like, say, the Black Panther sequel or Black Panther post-credits scene. So remember the way they introduced the Black Panther character in Captain America Civil War? You don't have to give him like a really huge backstory. You don't have to get into all the Atlantis stuff right away. Black Panther was a pretty big character during Captain America Civil War, and when you first meet him, you just get like a really quick scene with his father, so you learn a little bit about his relationship. You learn a little bit about who he is, what his political status is. He's a prince who then becomes king when his father dies, who wants to avenge him. You don't learn about any of the complexities of Wakanda. You don't get to see it until we get to the Black Panther movie a couple years later. We just saw Atlantis in the Aquaman movie. Obviously, if Marvel ever does a version of Atlantis, it's going to have to look radically different. The easiest way to avoid that landmine is just step around it and not do Atlantis for a long time. We've already gotten that Atlantis Easter egg scene at the end of Iron Man 2 when Nick Fury is grilling Iron Man about the Avengers Initiative.
I don't think I want you looking at that. I'm not sure it pertains to you anymore.
So in that scene, you actually look in the background on that map. Right next to Wakanda is Atlantis, right here in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That's one of those Odin's Vault style Marvel Phase 1 Easter eggs, like, hey, look in the background. If you're a big comic book fan, you'll probably recognize that that is Atlantis. Maybe we'll do that someday. And even though they've done it in some funny ways, they've paid off all those Odin's Vault Easter eggs. Like, the gauntlet turned out to be fake, but in time they explained what all those things were, so eventually we got our Black Panther movie because it's on the map in the background here next to Atlantis. That just means that eventually we'll get a version of Atlantis as well in some way. 3, you introduced Namor as a villain. Like I said, in the Silver Age, when they reintroduced the character, he was spending more time with Doctor Doom. Aquaman is like this big, goofy surfer bro hero. And I mean, even on comic book page, they read as very different characters, even though comic book Aquaman is very different from Jason Momoa movie Aquaman. But just because you introduce Namor as a villain doesn't mean that he has to be completely joyless or humorless. Black Panther is a really good example of a hero that doesn't spend a lot of time telling jokes, but is not humorless. You put a lot of people around him like Shuri, they bring a lot of the comedy into those scenes and he reacts off of them.
Delete that footage.
Once you spend a couple movies developing his character, you can do the Loki thing where he becomes more of an anti-hero later in his run, regardless of whether or not he continues to align himself with the villains of the MCU. In 2, you stay tonally consistent with the comic book version of the character in his initial appearances in other people's movies. This is where we get to the pitbull of it all, because a lot of people, when they're trying to criticize Marvel films, say that the tone is too light. Black Panther is a really good example of a Marvel film that does have a lot of humor, but tonally, amongst all the other Marvel characters, just feels like a more serious film than, say, like the Iron Man films. Because unlike Iron Man, you don't have Black Panther quipping at every turn, joking about every single situation, no matter how bad things get. Which is kind of what you have going on with the Aquaman movie. It's a lot harder to say movies are similar when they just feel tonally incredibly different. And number 1, probably the best thing that Marvel could do with an anti-hero or villainous bent character like Namor to differentiate him would be to make him part of a larger play towards an MCU version of something like the Cabal. Big crossover team between Fantastic Four, X-Men, and traditional MCU characters as a sort of anti-Avengers group, because we don't have the Illuminati, and technically the Cabal is like the evil version of the Illuminati. Smaller version of that would be like the Sinister Six inside a Spider-Man film, like a group of really good villain characters that you spend several movies developing so that when they all come together Avengers style or anti-Avengers style, you actually care about all of them. Really good example of this is when Marvel spends several films getting you to care about the relationship between Captain America and Iron Man, in the relationship between Captain America and Bucky, so that when they did the big twist in Civil War, Iron Man learning that Bucky killed his parents, you totally buy into it and genuinely care about everyone in that fight, all 3 of them. So early prediction right now, Marvel still waits a couple years before even thinking about introducing the Namor character, but I definitely think they do him eventually just because audiences have already bought into the concept of an aquatic-based character like that. And right now anyway, the big ticket item on Kevin Feige's mind is in folding in the Fox X-Men characters. Namor is sort of a bonus addition to that kind of stuff, and we will be talking a lot about X-Men plans inside the MCU. I already posted that video of Kevin Feige talking about his X-Men plans this year. Click here to watch that, and click here to learn why Marvel just retconned Thor and Loki ahead of Avengers Endgame. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.